KAI. It's been weeks since I last saw Bella, and I couldn't help the restlessness I've been feeling about all of it. Ralph told me to thread carefully, but I honestly couldn't depict the hidden meaning behind it no matter how hard I tried. Her family members, particularly her mother, have been cold to me, making it clear with their actions that they didn't want me around the house. I had no reasons, but I'd be damned if I tried to force my way through doors that were shut in my face. Cora, on the other hand, was my responsibility, and even in Bella's absence, I made sure to take care of her mother. I had invited the best cardiologist in the country to treat her, and from the reports from the doctor, she was showing signs of improvements already. I yearned for her, as all my mind could think of was her, even as I tried to drown myself in piles of paperwork. I had asked her to give me a chance, but she never really gave me an answer. Nothing was as unsettling as not being able to even see her for weeks, so as I laid eyes on her for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I wasn't exactly sure what to do or say. For weeks, all I've wanted to do was hold her close to me, feel her warmth against mine, kiss her everywhere, touch her, in places that would make her squirm in my hold or moan even, mark her, make her mine. For weeks, Bella was the only consistent thinking in my mind. I let my eyes roam the outfit she had on. The sequins material that scintillated under the disco lights hugged her curves perfectly, stopping on her thigh, only long enough to cover her bum, with a pelvis bone high slit that revealed way too much. I swallowed, allowing my eyes to trail over her bare thighs down her sexy legs, stopping when I noticed the fuck-me stilettos she had on. I forced my eyes back up to meet hers but couldn't help. I clenched my jaw, containing the jealousy, anger that was flowing through me. Yes, she was wearing the sexiest thing I had ever seen, but at a club? Really? Showing off all of what's mine to these hungry-looking men? I had the strong urge to gouge out all of their eyes, but my thoughts were interrupted when she spoke. "What are you doing here?" The words trailed off, her tones slurring into a gentle haze. Her eyelids fluttered, struggling to remain open, a telltale sign that she was drunk. The soft glow of the surrounding light danced across her face, accentuating the delicate, vulnerable curves of her features. Her voice, even in its drunken slur, wielded a potent power over me. It stirred the desires that had been simmering beneath the surface, a slow-burning fire that threatened to consume me whole. My wolf, sensing the turmoil, let out a low, rumbling growl, its restless energy coursing through my veins like liquid fire. The air was charged with tension, the very atmosphere seeming to vibrate. "How much have you had?" I squinted, my brow quirking up as I accessed her. She could barely stand in her own feet, swaying. "None of your business," she snapped, though the words lacked bite. "You're a doctor now, Bella. You should know better than this." I knew talking to someone this intox was really sensible, but I did it anyway. "Don't lecture me," she muttered, crossing my arms, her lips outing slightly. I sighed, combing my hair with my fingers. I was slightly concerned. "I'm not lecturing you. I'm actually concerned." "I'm fine, bossy. I'm here with Lily," she said with a subtle roll of her eyes, swaying a bit to the right as she did. I looked around and didn't see anybody with her. "And where is this Lily?" I asked, raising my brow on a questioning manner. I managed to take her out of the club, and as she kept complaining about not needing me babysitting her, Lily, I suppose, came out of the club and rode with us back to the apartment Bella now lived in. At least now I knew her address. I thought to myself as we walked to the door, but just as I was about to leave, her fingers wrapped firmly around my wrist, prompting me to meet her gaze. I could not name the emotion that I saw in her eyes, and I had to remind myself that she was drunk, and I couldn't touch her or kiss her in this state. "Wait," she said, my voice slurring slightly, her eyes fluttering. She looked at me from beneath my lashes, and thoughts of the things I was Ted to do to her flashed across my mind. Fuck. I raised an eyebrow, looking at her cautiously, masking the raw desire that was building in me. "Bella, you need to rest." "I will." She was tugging on my wrist now. "But you can't just leave like this. Come in." Bella sure didn't let me finish, pulling me inside and shutting the door behind us. "I don't want to be alone," she confessed, bobbing her head to the side, her gaze never leaving mine. I think I'll leave you two alone," Lily said, heading to what I assume is the corridor. "Fine. Just for a minute, I replied, running my fingers through my hair, desperately trying to keep off her. Only heavens know that I'd do if I touched her. She smiles, taking my hand as she led Maine to the living room, collapsing onto the couch with a heavy sigh. See? Not so bad, she said, smiling up at me. She didn't look like someone who could handle alcohol, so I wonder why she was at a club anyway. I crouched down in front of her. Bella, you're exhausted. You should be in bed. She waved at me dismissively. The couch is fine. I shook my head. No, it's not. And without waiting for a response, I picked her up bridal style and headed for the corridor, but not without noticing the very expensive make wristwatch on a lamp table by the door and a tie. Who the fuck owns those? I looked at Bella in my arms, who had her eyes closed, but I knew she wasn't sleeping because her fingers were trailing up my nape, and if I weren't so angry and jealous, maybe it would have affected me differently. With her help, I found her bedroom and eased her onto the bed. I clenched and unclenched my fists, wristwatch and tie. Bella? I called her name and she hummed. Who owns the place? I asked, hoping that even in her drunken state, she's able to give me a coherent answer. It's my brother's place. She shrugged casually. He's letting me stay here while we figure things out. On instant, my anger died out, my eyes darting to her as she sat with her back resting against the headboard. Come. She stretched out her hand, and I took it, sitting beside her on the bed with one leg folded beneath me and the other one touching the floor. Were you jealous, I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on her perfect heat-shaped lips that were painted in a bright red color. Damn, I wanted to kiss her so bad. You were jealous. She wasn't asking this time, and I felt a small smile creep onto my lips. Maybe a little. I indulged her, and a chortle escaped her lips. Can I kiss you? She asked me after a while of silence, and it felt like all my brain cells stopped working. No, I replied, my voice low and guttural. Why not? She whined, cupping my cheeks with both hands, her gaze dropping to my lips as she brushed her thumb against it. I sucked in a sharp breath, unable to understand why her touching me was doing so much to me. Way too much. Because you're drunk, I replied. I'm in my senses. I want to kiss you. Her hands were on my chest now, my skin burning at the contact, even though there was a thick layer of clothing between her hand and my chest. She started to undo the buttons of my shirt, taking her bottom lip in her mouth, and when she bit on the plump flesh. She pressed her lips against mine, sucking and nibbling on my bottom lip. Every restraint in me shattered as I kissed her back, sliding my tongue in her mouth. She started to shrug my shirt off, and I moved away from her before I did anything I would regret. I headed to the bathroom and helped myself through an orgasm. As I caught my breath, it occurred to me that for the first time in a long time, I felt something so consuming for a woman, and it wasn't Mabel. I could feel my feelings for Mabel fade away, as only one person now consumed my mind, only one person I wanted to have and belong to. For the first time ever, I had thoughts of being with someone else, and guilt wasn't chewing me up from the insides. It felt right. The moon goddess had really blessed me with a second chance, and I wasn't in any Walt willing to let her go. Not now, not ever, Bella. I groaned as I woke up, my head pounding like a drum. The sunlight streaming through my window made everything worse, and I buried my face in my pillow. My wolf wasn't going to let me off the hook, though. You ruined a perfect night with Kai, she scoffed, her voice sharp in my mind. Of course you'd mess it up. Too much to ask for a little restraint. Not now, I mumbled, dragging myself upright despite the nausea swirling in my stomach. I tried to shake off the fragments of last night, but they came back in pieces. The way Kai politely turned me down when I practically begged to kiss him, the way his lips felt against mine. The rush of emotions I hadn't been ready to deal with, and my spectacular decision to drink enough wine to forget about it. Clearly it hadn't worked. I grimaced at what I did, almost did to the poor guy. I practically threw myself at him. Another groan escaped my lips. Why did this happen to me? Why did I do something so dumb? The embarrassment hit me all over again, and I groaned. Could you just not? I muttered to my wolf, but she was relentless. You could have had something special, but no, you had to ruin it, she continued. How are you going to face him now? I sighed, rubbing my temples as I tried to block her out. She wasn't wrong, though. Kai had been nothing but kind and patient, and I'd thrown it back in his face by acting like a complete slut. A horny teenage girl with no self-control. No offense to teenage girls, though. What had I done? The memories were very fussy, but I know I had begged to kiss him, practically pounced on him, and I would not be the least bit surprised. To be honest, Kai was too handsome for his own good. How could someone look like that? So technically, it was his fault, not mine. He should blame the moon goddess for creating him like that. Another important thing to be noted was that I was his mate, even though I pushed him away like every day, but I was his mate nonetheless. I buried my head into my pillow, letting out muffled screams. Does your denial help ease your poor heart? The mocking in my wolf's voice made me sneer. Will you fucking come off it? Like you came off Kai last night? Came her retort. What a wolf I got. The moon goddess had no affinity for me, I guessed. I already feel bad as it is. Why do you want to make matters worse for me? What do you want? You're lucky he didn't carry you home on his shoulders. That would have been humiliating, my wolf added smugly. I get it, okay? I snapped, though it was more at myself than her. What was supposed to be a magical night with Kai had turned into a mess. I couldn't even imagine what he thought of me now. But I couldn't focus on that right now. Today was too important. I dragged myself out of bed, showered, and pulled myself together as best I could. My nerves began to settle when I remembered why today mattered so much. After a few minutes of wallowing, I forced myself to sit up. The room spun for a second, but I steadied myself and inhaled deeply. Today was too important to dwell on my mistakes. I had a job to do, and I wasn't about to let a hangover or last night's embarrassment ruin it. By the time I had showered and dressed, I felt more human. Thanks to Kai, my foster mother had finally been transferred to one of the best hospitals in the city. It was something I'd been dreaming of for years, and today was my first day working there. By the time I arrived at the hospital, the pounding in my head had subsided, replaced by a sense of determination. The building towered above me, its sleek glass facade gleaming in the morning sun. Being in the hospital filled me with a mix of nerves and excitement. The facility was even more impressive in person. A sleek, modern building with towering glass windows that gleamed in the sunlight. Inside, the air was filled with the soft hum of voices and the faint scent of antiseptic. I made my way to the admin office, where a smiling receptionist handed me my new uniform and badge. "Welcome, Dr. Montague," she said warmly. "We're so glad to have you here. You've joined an amazing team." "Thank you," I replied, holding back a smile as I slipped on my white coat. The weight of it felt significant, like a symbol of everything I'd worked for. As I headed toward the locker room to stow my bag, I passed several of my new colleagues. They were wolves like me, but from packs far more accomplished and prestigious than my own. Yet they greeted me with genuine smiles and nods, their warmth surprising me. I had expected to feel like an outsider, but instead, I felt an unexpected sense of belonging. All my life, this was what I had longed for, a family, a home, somewhere I could call my own. I slipped off the coat, the weight of it both grounding and empowering. As I stored my badge, I couldn't help but smile. I would wear it when I had my first patient. My heart fluttered. It pained me that I couldn't wear it every day, soon. This moment wasn't just about me, it was for my mom, for all the sacrifices she had made to get me here. By the time I left the locker room, I felt fulfilled in a way I hadn't in years. This was what I'd always wanted, to make a difference, to be part of something bigger than myself. Stepping into the main corridor, I felt a surge of pride as I greeted my new colleagues. They were from packs I'd only ever heard about in passing, their reputations as skilled doctors and researchers preceding them. To my relief, they were warm and welcoming, their curiosity about my background genuine, rather than judgmental. That contentment, however, didn't last long. I turned a corner too quickly and collided with someone coming from the opposite direction. The impact was enough to send my clipboard tumbling to the floor, and I immediately bent to pick it up. "Watch where you're going," a sharp voice snapped above me. I straightened slowly, recognizing the voice even before I looked up. Layla. Of course, it had to be her. She stood there in her pristine designer outfit, her expression a mixture of disdain and annoyance. "It's your fault," I said, keeping my tone neutral. You bumped into me." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, do you even know who you're talking to?" I sighed, already regretting this encounter. Layla was the kind of person who thrived on drama, and I didn't have the patience for it. "Layla," I said, my voice calm but firm, "we're in a hospital. Can you try to keep it down?" Her glare turned icy. "Don't tell me what to do. And what are you even doing here? You don't belong in a place like this." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to snap back. Instead, I grabbed her arm and pulled her into a secluded corner away from the bustling hallway. "First of all," I said, my voice low but steady, "I don't have time for your nonsense. Second, if you think you can cause a scene here, think again." Before she could respond, I kicked her ankle just hard enough to make her stumble. Then I clamped a hand over her mouth to stop the string of insults I knew was coming. "Listen," I said quietly, leaning in close. "We're not kids, Layla. This isn't a playground, and you don't get to push me around. Keep quiet, stay out of my way, and we'll get along just fine." Her eyes burned with fury, but I didn't care. I released her and stepped back, daring her to make another move. For a moment, I thought she might actually listen, but then her expression twisted into a smug smirk. "You're nobody," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Just a little country wolf pretending to be important. You don't deserve to be here." She pulled out her phone and began dialing, her tone turning sweet as she said, "Security? There's someone here who doesn't belong. I'd like them removed immediately." I crossed my arms, waiting as the guards arrived. Layla stood there, exuding arrogance as she pointed at me. "She's trespassing," Layla declared. "Get her out of here." "You don't have the slightest clue what you're doing, Layla. You'll regret this." I narrowed my eyes on her. "Regret what? Regret treating you like the thrash you are? I highly doubt that." "I'm thrash? Don't you know what you are? What were you born from?" Looking at the two of us, it's not difficult to tell who the thrash is, logically speaking. But I guess logic has never been your strongest suit. I mean, how can it be? I scoffed. "You," she walked closer to me, her hand raised in the air to strike me, but I caught her wrist and flung it away with such force that she almost fell. One of the guards stepped toward me, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge. "I work here," I said, holding it up for them to see. "I'm a doctor." The guards exchanged glances before looking back at Layla. "She's lying," Layla screeched, her voice rising in pitch. There's no way she could. The guards ignored her, focusing on the badge in my hand. One of them nodded. "It's legitimate. She's on staff." I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile as the realization dawned on Layla's face. "Now," I said, turning to the guards, "she just tried to have a physician removed from her place of work. Not to mention, she attempted to assault me." The guards didn't need further instruction. They grabbed Layla by the arms, ignoring her protests as they escorted her out of the hospital. "You'll regret this," she shouted over her shoulder, but I was already walking away, satisfied that she wouldn't be causing any more trouble. At least not today. Bella. Satisfaction. The word didn't cut it. What I felt after that confrontation with Layla surpassed contentment. I didn't know I needed to unleash and air out my mind until I did, and now I feel lighter, happier even. I chuckled to myself as the image of her face scrunched up in a mix of shock and annoyance resurfaced in my mind. She was unnecessarily mean and needed to be taught a proper lesson. I was more than happy to do the honors. As I stepped into the locker room, the familiar scent of antiseptic and fresh laundry enveloped me, instantly calming my mind. I slipped out of my clothes and into a crisp white scrub, the soft fabric a comforting hug against my skin. I couldn't help but smile as I thought about my patient for the day, Cora. My foster mother's warm, gentle face floated into my mind, and a wave of excitement washed over me. It had been a while since I'd seen her, and I couldn't wait to see her, check up on her progress, and how well she's been doing since we brought her here. As I stepped into the private ward, my eyes scanned the room, taking in the familiar beeps of the monitors and the soft hum of the ventilator. My gaze landed on Cora, her frail form nestled beneath the crisp white sheets. But what caught me off guard was the figure standing beside her, my brother, Xavier. He was dressed in a scrub, his eyes fixed intently on Cora's chart as he jotted down some notes. My surprise must have been evident because Xavier's head jerked up, his eyes meeting mine in a flash of acknowledgement. "Hey, sis," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. But before he could explain what he was doing there, Cora's voice cut through the air, her excitement palpable. "Bella, sweetie, is that you?" Cora's eyes sparkled as she struggled to sit up, her face alight with a warm smile. "It's so good to see you, baby. Come give Mama a hug." I couldn't help but smile as I rushed to Cora's side, enveloping her in a warm hug. "Mama, it's so good to see you too," I exclaimed, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. Cora's arms wrapped tightly around me, holding me close as she planted a gentle kiss on my cheek. "I've missed you so much, baby," Cora whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm so proud of the strong, capable woman you've become." I felt a lump form in my throat as I pulled back to gaze at Cora's face, her eyes shining with tears. "I've missed you too, Mama," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so glad I got to see you today." Cora's face lit up with a warm smile, and she reached out to stroke my cheek. "I'm glad too, sweetie," she said. I turned to Xavier, my eyes locking onto his as I raised an eyebrow in silent inquiry. Xavier's expression turned serious, and he nodded slightly before launching into an explanation. "Kai asked me to take a look at Cora's case," he said, his voice low and measured. "He wanted to make sure she was getting the best care possible." I felt a warmth spread through my chest as Kai's name was mentioned, a sense of gratitude and appreciation welling up inside me. I remembered the promise Kai had made to me, his words echoing in my mind. "I'll make sure she gets the best treatment, the best doctors. I'll take care of it." And now, it seemed he had followed through on that promise, bringing in Xavier to oversee Cora's care. A small smile played on my lips as I thought about Kai's actions. It was a thoughtful and kind gesture, one that spoke volumes about his character. My eyes drifted back to Cora, who was watching me with a knowing glint in her eye. She had always been able to read me like a book, and I knew she could see the emotions swirling inside me. I smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Knowing that Kai had taken Cora's health seriously, that he had gone out of his way to ensure she received the best care possible, filled me with a sense of warmth and gratitude towards him. Cora's voice cut through my thoughts, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "I see you're thinking about someone, Bella," she said, her voice teasing. "Care to tell Mama what's got you smiling like that?" I felt a blush rise to my cheeks as I looked away, trying to play it cool, but Cora just chuckled. Xavier nodded at us before turning to leave. "I'll be right back. I need to get a report from the lab," he said, his eyes flicking to Cora before he stepped out of the room. As soon as the door closed behind him, Cora's expression turned serious. She reached out and took my hand, her eyes locking onto mine. "Bella, sweetie, I want to talk to you about something," she said, her voice low and gentle. I leaned in, curious, as Cora continued. "I know you've been through a lot, and you've had to deal with some really tough stuff, but I want you to know that you deserve to be happy, Bella. You deserve to find love and joy, and to have someone who loves and cherishes you for who you are." Cora's eyes sparkled with a knowing glint. "I think the moon goddess is offering you a new chance at happiness, Bella. Don't be afraid to take it." My heart swelled with emotion as I looked at Cora, feeling a surge of love and gratitude towards her. I was about to start talking about Kai, to tell her about the way he made me feel, when a knock at the door interrupted us. The nurse poked her head into the room. "Dr. Bella, you're needed at the lab. They need your expertise on a patient's test results." I nodded, feeling a pang of disappointment at being interrupted, but I knew I had to go. I leaned in to give Cora a quick hug. "I'll be right back, Mama, I promise." Cora smiled, her eyes shining with understanding. "I'll be here, sweetie. Go take care of your patient." I made my way to the lab, my mind still on the conversation I had with Cora. As I entered the lab, I spotted Xavier already seated at a workstation, studying a set of test results. He looked up as I approached, his eyes locking onto mine. "Hey, sis," he said, his voice low and serious. "I've been going over Cora's test results, and I think we need to adjust our plan." I nodded, my curiosity piqued, as I took a seat beside him. Xavier handed me a file, and I scanned the contents, my eyes widening as I took in the information. Cora's health had deteriorated significantly as a result of the wolf toxin, and it was clear that we needed to take a different approach. "We can't do the heart surgery yet," Xavier said, his voice firm. "We need to get the toxin out of her system first." I nodded in agreement, my mind racing with the implications. "I think we should start her on a detoxifying treatment," Xavier continued. "It's the best way to get the toxin out of her system and stabilize her health." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination wash over me. "Let's do it," I said, my voice firm. "We'll get Cora the treatment she needs, and then we'll reassess her condition before proceeding with the surgery." Xavier nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I knew I could count on you, sis," he said, his voice low and serious. "Let's get to work." As we finished up at the hospital, Xavier and I decided to stop by the supermarket to pick up some groceries. We wandered the aisles, tossing items into our cart as we chatted about our day. But just as we were about to check out, Xavier's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "I'm so sorry, sis," he said, his face apologetic. "I have to go. Emergency surgery." I nodded understandingly, waving him off. "Go, I've got this," I said, smiling. Xavier nodded and took off, leaving me to finish up the shopping on my own. I paid for the groceries and loaded them into the car, my mind wandering to the events of the day. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a figure waiting outside my front door. My heart skipped a beat as I realized it was Kai. He was leaning against the railing, his eyes fixed intently on me as I stepped out of the car. A slow smile spread across his face, and he pushed off from the railing, his movements fluid and effortless. "Hey," he said, his voice low and inviting. "Can I come in?" Bella. I never expected Kai to take my offhand suggestion so seriously. It had been a casual, almost playful remark, more an escape from the pressure surrounding us than a legitimate proposal. A chance at happiness, my mum had called it, but could I even find it? Marriages or fates that I had seen throughout my life didn't end well, didn't turn out the way people had spun it to be. It wasn't the moon goddess's plan to see us suffer. I was sure she wanted us to be happy, or maybe she knew about it, and this was all some twisted game, but how would I know? Gray and Cora's lives were intertwined, destined to be together, but look at what they became. Marriage. The words tasted foreign in my mouth, but looking at Kai, it didn't make my insides squirm for all the wrong reasons. So here we were, discussing the terms of a contract marriage as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Kai's eagerness caught me off guard, but as I considered it, I realized it made a strange kind of sense. He had always been pragmatic, composed, and dependable. Everything about him screamed stability, qualities I desperately needed in my life. And though we weren't in love, there was an unspoken trust between us, a foundation I could rely on. That night, over a beautifully set dinner Kai had arranged, I found myself studying him. The flickering candlelight softened his sharp features, and the faint clinking of silverware created a soothing rhythm in the background. It felt surreal, sitting across from him and talking about something as absurd as a marriage contract. "You're serious about this?" I asked, my fork poised above my plate. Maybe he was joking, playing along with my joke. The thought that he was lying sent bile to my throat. I narrowed my eyes on him. Kai nodded, his gaze steady, completely. "It's logical, Bella. We both need this, for different reasons." I sighed, pushing my food around my plate. "It's not exactly a fairy tale, is it?" He smirked, a rare expression for him. "I'm not exactly Prince Charming," he wasn't. He treated me not in the best way, to put it mildly, but his later actions somehow made me see who he was on the inside. Maybe he wasn't so bad. I liked his name, Kai. It sounded nice. The comment drew a small laugh from me, and for the first time, I allowed myself to relax. "Fine, but I have my reasons for agreeing, and I need you to understand them." Kai set down his glass of wine, giving me his full attention. His intensity was unnerving sometimes, but tonight it felt reassuring. I took a deep breath and began to explain. I told him about my mother, the suffocating expectations, and the relentless whispers of judgment. I just want her to be safe. I need her to be. All I do is for her. Marrying him, even in name only, would shield me from all of that. It was a shield I desperately needed, and Kai was the only person I could trust to wield it. He cared about me, I think. He would support me. We may not have the other bond that didn't stem from the mate's bond, but he wouldn't leave me. He wasn't Gray. He would never be. I hoped. Leaving things up to fate and chances didn't always end well in most cases, but I was putting my trust in him. This could work. Maybe. Maybe it would be the worst decision of my life. My wolf agreed on me making terrible decisions, that was for sure. We could just add it to the long list. I tried to laugh inside to stop the nerves from bubbling up to the surface. His gaze softened as I spoke, a flicker of something I couldn't quite identify crossing his face. Was it pity? Sympathy? Whatever it was, it made my chest tighten. When I finished, he nodded thoughtfully. I understand, and I'll make sure this arrangement works for both of us. We wasted no time finalizing the terms of the contract. It was a straightforward agreement, clear boundaries, defined roles, and an expiration date. Yet, as clinical as it all sounded, there was an underlying current of something deeper, something unspoken. Let's sign it tomorrow, Kai said firmly, his tone leaving no room for debate. I nodded, my mind spinning as the weight of our decision settled over me. I would be married. This had to be some weird fever dream. I never thought I'd be married. I never thought I would have a future or something even remotely close. However, now I was a doctor working at one of the biggest hospitals in the city, and far away from the place I once called my home. Life sometimes did work for you. The wine flowed freely as the evening progressed, loosening the tension between us. I didn't realize how much I had relaxed until I caught Kai staring at me across the table, his gaze lingering in a way that made my pulse quicken. You look different tonight, he said, his voice low and steady. Different? I arched my brow, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through me. Charming. The red wine makes you simply exquisite tonight. His lips quirked into a small smile, and I felt my cheeks heat up. The air between us shifted, charged with an intensity I hadn't anticipated. Before I could overthink it, Kai stood and walked over to me, his movements slow and deliberate. Bella, he murmured, his voice like a caress. I barely had time to respond before his arms wrapped around me, pulling me into a kiss that stole the breath from my lungs. His lips were firm and demanding, leaving no room for hesitation. My body responded instinctively, melting against him as a wave of heat coursed through me. This time there was no hesitation between the both of us, especially him like the night I was drunk. It was slow, savoring my taste. I could taste the wine we had drunk, and it tasted even better on his lips. He sucked on my lips, gnawing the lower lip. His hands roamed my back, steadying me as my legs grew weak. I let out a groan, and he took it as a sign to inch into dangerous territory. I could feel the ghost of his touch on my ass. The kiss deepened, and I found myself clutching his shirt, desperate to anchor myself as desire threatened to consume me entirely. Bella, Kai whispered against my lips, his voice rough with need. Kai's kiss turned hungrier, more urgent, and I found myself swept away by the intensity of it. His hands moved to my waist, lifting me effortlessly as he carried me toward the bedroom. Kai. I managed to whisper between kisses, my breath hitching. He didn't respond with words, just a low growl of acknowledgement that sent a shiver down my spine. His usual composed demeanor was gone, replaced by something wild and unrestrained, and I couldn't deny how much it excited me. The bedroom door closed behind us, and I barely registered the soft thud before he lowered me onto the bed. His weight pressed against me as he claimed my lips again, and I surrendered to the heat building between us. Bella, he murmured, his voice husky, his breath warm against my collarbone. Kai. Just as I felt the final barrier between us beginning to break, the door to the bedroom burst open. Startled, I gasped and pushed Kai away instinctively, my heart leaping into my throat. Kai froze above me, his head snapping toward the door. Xavier stood there, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. What the hell is going on here? Xavier's voice was low, dangerous. Get out, Kai growled, his tone colder than I'd never heard it. When Xavier didn't leave, Kai bit down on my lip, and I didn't want to groan, but my body was a traitorous vixen. But Xavier didn't move. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes locked on Kai with a rage that practically crackled in the air. I said, "What the hell is going on?" Xavier repeated, louder this time. I scrambled to sit up, pulling the sheets around me as my mind raced. Xavier, this isn't. Before I could finish, Xavier's fist connected with Kai's jaw in a powerful punch that sent him staggering back. Kai's reaction was a smirk that quickly turned into a scowl as he launched forward, landing a punch of his onto Xavier's face. "Xavier, stop!" I screamed, jumping off the bed as the two men squared off. Xavier. The mere sight of Layla was enough to turn even the brightest day to a dismal one. Irritation coursed through me as I walked through the corridors to my office where she was waiting for me. I rolled my eyes, clicking my tongue in annoyance as I reached for the key card in my pocket to unlock the door. I pushed the door open, walking in first and closing it in her face, not bothering to let her in. Regardless, Layla pushed the door open, the force causing it to hit the wall as I carefully dropped my things on my desk, removing my phone from my pocket first. I glanced at her as she simply stood there, her arms folded across her chest with a stupid look on her face. She looked every bit like the spoiled, overly entitled bitch she was. I sighed. Sometimes I wished I could hit women. "Couldn't you at least open the door for me?" Layla snarled, her lips curled into a shape that just made her seem more appalling than usual. "I'm your younger sister. Treat me nicely." I scoffed. "You have hands, don't you? Besides, you opened it just fine. You're a woman, Layla. At least have some sense of self-preservation." Layla pursed her lips, scowling, but she remained rooted to her spot, clearly waiting for something. Reluctantly, I stretched out a hand, gesturing at the chair on the other side of my desk, plopping myself down on my own twirly plush leather chair. She took a seat, throwing her purse on the chair beside her as she raised her leg, crossing one over the other as she made herself at home. Despite being my stepsister, I felt nothing for Layla. Well, other than disgust, at least. When we were younger, she followed Lennon around all the time. It was infuriating as it was irritating. And when she wasn't with Lennon, she tried to stick herself to Ralph or my mother like glue. She hardly even acknowledged my presence most of the time, so being around her always made my skin itch. The way she spoke, as if she had a single authority to her name, was nauseating. And it only seemed to worsen as she got older, really, and now she was like this. The audacity she had to take the family name as a middle name was surprising, to say the least. I always knew she was a tad bit unruly, but the characters she's been exhibiting recently were more shocking than I thought. "Where were you?" I blinked, holding back a scowl at the question. I took in a deep breath, inhaling through my nose and exhaling through my mouth. I fought back a gag as her raspberry scent filled my nostrils. "Pardon?" I finally asked back, arching a brow. "I want to know where you were," Layla repeated, not faltering as her tone grew more leveled. "You weren't in the office when I came in, and I was looking for you. You're supposed to be a doctor, so you should be responsible." I blinked again, this time more rapidly in quick succession. My lips parted, and I couldn't help but tilt my head to the side as I regarded how calm she was as she questioned me. "Are you serious?" I blurted. "Yes," she answered me quickly. "Why wouldn't I be? I want to know where you were." I scoffed, huffing out a laugh. I narrowed my eyes at her slightly, a bit taken aback by the audacity. "My God, you actually can't be serious." "I'm serious," Layla replied coolly. "Tell me where you were." "Jesus, stop acting like a little bitch, Layla," I finally said, snorting. "You know, I thought getting a mate would make you more bearable, but I guess I'll be damned before you ever have manners." I didn't give her a chance to clap back, continuing. "Where is he anyway? Is he already tired of you?" Layla seethed, her eyebrows furrowing. "What?" "Max," I clarified. "Why isn't he here? I thought he would be attached to your hip or something." I watched in sick satisfaction as Layla faltered, stuttering over her words as a slight flush tainted her cheeks, spreading. Layla trailed off, her face morphing into a full-grown frown as she struggled to settle for a reply. Finally, she answered, "He's busy. At work." "At work," I parroted with a teasing lilt. "And he's been at work for more than 2 weeks?" "Yes," she snapped, rather defensively. "He's busy at work, Xavier. I don't know what other answer you're looking for." I let the silence hang in the air for a few moments, hoping it would make her simply disappear. Unfortunately, it didn't. "You know, your presence is awfully irritating today, and I don't really wonder why, but I do wonder just what you're doing here in my office." Layla just shrugged, settling in the chair once again. "I'm here to see my brother, of course." "Don't call me that," I said, quickly shutting her down. God, even the way the word brother sounded coming from her mouth was so irritating. I'm not your brother. That's your problem to handle, not mine, Layla snarled. Luna Olive already sees me as her daughter, so I'm your sister, Xavier, whether you like it or not. I glared at her, holding back a growl at the clear challenge. I would rather die than accept Layla as my sister. She was nothing to me. She couldn't care less about me, so there was really no reason for me to care about her. All she wanted from our family was the money and recognition that came with the Montague name. She had no right to claim to be one of us. But Bella, she belonged with us. Bella shouldn't be suffering at my mother's hands the way she was now, and it was every little bit unfair. Regardless of the fact that we met recently, she trusts me and clearly cares about me, very obviously bothered about my well-being. But I could die today, and Layla would simply bat her eyelash and mother to ask for another expensive handbag. The thought filled me with an unnatural sense of repulsion and hatred. I was fed up and irritated. I growled, waving my hand dismissively as I pinned Layla with a glare, making sure my angered scent filled the air. Get the fuck out! Bella's pose. I paced around the living room, nipping at my fingernails unsurely. My feet hadn't known rest since I had arrived, and as I moved around, my unease didn't waver. I think you're worrying for nothing. I paused, raising my eyes to look at Kai as he sat down on the couch, unbothered. What if he doesn't accept you? I asked instead, ignoring his comment. What if he forbids you from coming near me? I don't think you should. The front door opened and the keys jingled as Xavier shut the door. I could hear his footsteps coming closer, and I braced myself, turning so I could face him the second he walked in. He paused in the hallway, a greeting seemingly caught in his throat as his eyes darted from me to Kai, and then back to me, an eyebrow raised. You're joking, he deadpanned, a look of annoyance flashing across his face. Wait, we need to talk. I moved closer to him, blocking his view so he would have to push me to see Kai fully. I took his hand, squeezing a bit as I stared up at him. It was a misunderstanding. What was? I held back a flinch at Xavier's tone, his voice low and cold. He'd never spoken to me that way before, and I really hoped this would be the last time. Kai didn't force me into anything. I trailed off, wondering how to word the situation properly. I let him touch me, Xavier. It was consensual. Consexual, he parroted blankly, his expression unreadable. Yes, and we're getting married. Sorry? Xavier snorted, almost in disbelief. Are you serious? Bella, you're insane. You're not. Bella's an adult. I held back a frustrated sigh at Kai's interruption. Xavier looked straight ahead, quiet as Kai continued talking. She can do whatever she wants, and there's nothing you can do about it. I looked over my shoulder, watching as Kai folded his arms over his chest. And if she says we're getting married, it's because we are. I'm taking my future Luna home. Bella. The sound of Xavier's pen tapping against his desk was loud enough to cut through the quiet atmosphere of the hospital. It was deliberate, and most of all, pointed. He didn't even bother looking up when I stepped into his office, but the tension in his jaw told me everything I needed to know. He was still upset, and knowing Xavier, he wouldn't let it go easily. I brought lunch, I said, holding up a neatly packed container like a peace offering. He finally glanced at me, his expression skeptical. What's in it? Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed broccoli, your favorite. His pen stopped mid-tap, and he leaned back in his chair, eyeing the container like it might explode. You think food is going to make me forget about this ridiculous situation with Kai? I sighed, setting the container down on his desk. It's not bribery, Xavier. It's an olive branch, and besides, you have to eat. I don't have to eat your guilt-trip lunches, he muttered, though he didn't push the container away. I crossed my arms, leveling him with a look. You're not mad about the lunch. You're mad because you think I don't know what I'm doing. Newsflash. I do. He looked at me like what I had just said was questionable. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've tied yourself to a situation you don't fully understand. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Look, I know you're worried, but this is my decision. Kai and I have an agreement, and it's not as reckless as you think. Can't you just trust me this once? The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Then, with a resigned sigh, Xavier reached for the container and popped it open. "Fine," he said, stabbing a piece of chicken with his fork. "But if this tastes bad, I'm going to double down on the lectures." I smiled faintly, feeling the tension ease just a little. Deal. Placating Xavier had become a regular part of my routine, along with adjusting to the hospital's fast pace. My foster mother took so much pride in my progress at the hospital. She said it often, but it was already clear in the way her face lit up whenever I stopped by her room during rounds. "How's my girl doing today?" she asked one afternoon, adjusting the pillow behind her back as I stepped in with her lunch. "Better than you, I hope," I teased, setting the tray on her bedside table. "Did you eat this morning, or are you still trying to argue with the nurses about portion sizes?" She laughed, a light, airy sound that made the sterile hospital room feel a little warmer. "They act like I'm not still a Luna. I told them I need real food, not these tiny scraps." "Mama, it's not scraps," I said, crossing my arms. "And you know you need to stick to the diet plan if you want to get stronger." She huffed, pretending to be annoyed, but the playful twinkle in her eyes gave her away. Fine, you're the doctor after all." "Mama, I got you something," I said, pulling a small box out of my bag. Her brows rose in curiosity. "What's this?" "Open it and see," I said, handing it to her. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a sleek new smartphone. For a moment, she just stared at it, her expression unreadable. "Bella," she finally said, holding it up like it might bite her, "you know I don't mess with these things. I can barely figure out the TV remote." "It's easier than you think," I said, dragging a chair over to sit beside her. "And it'll make things easier for both of us. You can call me whenever you need to, instead of waiting for me to drop by. Plus, I can send you updates about work or pictures of my day." She hesitated, turning the phone over in her hands. "I don't know, Bella. I'm not sure I'm cut out for all this technology stuff." "Come on, Mama," I said, smiling. "Let me show you. It's not hard, I promise." I spent the next hour walking her through the basics, how to call, text, and even check the weather. She picked it up faster than she gave herself credit for, though she grumbled every time she made a mistake. "This thing's too sensitive," she muttered after accidentally opening the camera. "No, you're just heavy-handed," I teased, earning a playful glare. "All right, doctor," she said with a smirk, handing it back to me. "I guess this isn't so bad, but if I get stuck, you'd better answer when I call." "You know I will," I said, tucking the phone into her hand again. "Keep it. You'll get the hang of it. Unfortunately, I have to leave right now, but I'll come check on you before I leave for the day." "Sure thing, dear." One afternoon during lunch, I was enjoying a rare moment of peace in the break room when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw it was Kai calling. My stomach did a little flip at the thought of him. "Don't keep him waiting," Lily teased, nudging my arm as she noticed the caller ID. "He's probably calling to remind you how lucky you are to get a guy like that." I rolled my eyes but couldn't suppress the smile that tugged at my lips. "Hey," I greeted, hoping my voice didn't sound as flustered as I felt. "Bella," Kai's voice had a hint of amusement in it that made me nervous. "I need you to come by the office to sign the marriage contract. It's time to make it official." I could feel Lily and Amber's attention on me the second he mentioned the contract, and even though I knew they couldn't hear him, I was pretty sure I could already hear the teasing in their minds. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'll be there soon." "Good. And, Bella," Kai added, his voice dropping to a playful tone, "don't take too long getting ready." My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly tried to mask my flustered expression. "I'll be there as soon as I can," I replied, my voice almost betraying the excitement I felt. I hung up and turned to find Lily and Amber grinning like they had just won a prize. "You're blushing," Lily said, her eyes wide with amusement. Amber gave a low whistle. "Girl, you've got the alpha wrapped around your finger." I swear I'm not the only one who noticed how he looks at you. I felt my cheeks heat even more. "Can we drop it, please?" I said, my voice more exasperated than I intended. Amber cut me off, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "You know, you and Alpha Kai would make the perfect power couple." I groaned, holding my head in my hands. "I really don't need this right now," I muttered, but deep down, their words still made me feel giddy in a way I couldn't explain. "Well, go ahead and make him wait," I'm sure he'd love that, Lily teased, winking. I grabbed my bag and stood up. I'll be back in a bit. Try not to make too much fun of me, okay? Amber grinned. No promises. As I left the break room, I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching me, but at the same time, I couldn't wait to see Kai or to sign the papers. Later that week, after signing our marriage papers at the Wolf Government Court, he surprised me with an invitation to dinner. We should celebrate, he said, handing me a crisp envelope. Inside was a handwritten note detailing the time and place. For what? I asked, looking up at him. He smirked, for making it official. I just found out from the Wolf government this morning. The idea of a celebratory dinner filled me with a mixture of excitement and nerves. I wanted to look my best, not just for him but for myself. At least that's what I told myself. I stood in front of the mirror, brushing out my hair and applying a final touch of lipstick. My reflection stared back at me, polished and confident. I had chosen a simple yet elegant black dress that hugged my figure in all the right places. It wasn't over the top, but it was enough to make me feel like I belonged in whatever high-end restaurant Kai had picked. When I arrived at the meeting point, he was already waiting for me. His sharp suit complemented his broad shoulders, and his hair was styled with precision. He looked every bit the powerful alpha he was. You look stunning, he said, his eyes scanning me appreciatively. Thank you, I replied, my cheeks warming under his gaze. He offered me his arm, and we made our way inside. The restaurant was the kind of place that oozed luxury. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and soft piano music played in the background. It was the kind of setting that demanded elegance and poise, qualities I wasn't sure I possessed. Kai left my side briefly to take care of something, leaving me in the lobby. I busied myself by admiring the decor, trying to ignore the stares of the well-dressed patrons around me. That's when I saw them. Layla and Max walked through the entrance like they owned the place. Layla's arm was looped through Max's, her laughter ringing out as she leaned in close to whisper something in his ear. My stomach twisted into knots. Of all the places they had to come here? Layla's gaze swept over the room before landing on me. Her eyes narrowed and her lips curled into a smug smile. She whispered something to Max, and he glanced in my direction. His expression was unreadable, but it was enough to make me want to disappear. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. This was my evening, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it. Kai returned moments later, his brows furrowing when he saw the tension in my posture. What's wrong? Nothing, I lied, plastering on a smile. Let's just enjoy dinner. He followed my gaze, and his jaw tightened when he spotted Layla and Max. Without a word, he placed a hand on my lower back and guided me toward our table. As we sat down, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. Layla was watching us, her expression souring as Kai leaned in to speak to me. Don't let them get to you, he said quietly, his voice steady. I won't, I replied, though my heart was still racing. Bella. Don't let her ruin your mood. I internally chided myself and tried to smile when Kai leaned in and pecked me on the cheek. My face burned with heat as I put my head down and smiled shyly. I tried to pacify my racing heart, and I pecked him back. I'll be right back. I just want to get something, yeah? I nodded as he stood and walked towards the exit door. As I gazed around the Ethiopian restaurant, I took in the vibrant atmosphere. The dim lighting, colorful traditional fabrics, and eclectic decor all blended together to create a warm and inviting space. I looked at where Kai left, suddenly annoyed that he left me. Then I found her gaze, Layla. My heart sank as she sauntered over, her eyes gleaming with malice. Well, look what we have here, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Bella, my sister. I fought the urge to roll my eyes at her petty attempt to put me down. I sighed, taking a few steps towards her. Layla, what a pleasant surprise to see you. Can I help you? I matched her gaze, trying to act confident even when I was dying inside. She snickered and touched my arm, pulling me up with a force I couldn't muster. Don't you dare talk to me like that. Who do you think you are? You think you can help me? How pathetic. She scoffed and raised her hands for emphasis, but I was too stunned to speak. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. People present at the restaurant were watching. I smiled, a slow yet taunting smile, and said, Layla, what do you want? I looked at her, exasperated as she laughed, loud and piercing, that caught the attention of the whole room. What do I need? She stared at me like I was a moron. I know that low lives like you don't even know what meal they serve here, or even how to properly use cutlery. She stared at me, her gaze laced with disgust as she eyed me. I confidently picked the menu and stared at it. I was trying to pick a random meal. Aha! I found it. Here, on the first page, we have ribs, made of stir-fried meat with onions, pepper, and spices. I smiled and looked up. Layla couldn't believe it. Her eyes watched me, and I smiled in victory and said, "Should I continue?" She sneered and turned to Max and laughed. "Just because you know the ingredients of the food doesn't mean you can afford it. So, I'll say you should leave before you embarrass yourself." Just as I was about to speak, Kai walked in and stared at us in confusion, his gaze wavering between us both. "What's going on?" he said, his voice dangerously calm as he watched Layla. "And you are?" Layla asked him as she eyed him. "Ha! Of course you do not know me. I am Kai Malarkey. Ring a bell?" He laughed, a deep and throaty laugh, before staring at her, his gaze laced with contempt. Layla's gaze flattered for a moment, before she regained her composure. "Kai Malarkey, who?" Her voice quivered, or was it just me? Kai stared at her. An emotion I couldn't decipher crossed his features as he took slow strides towards her. "And so you need to leave, right now," he growled and stared down at her. Layla shivered and stepped back. "And who the fuck are you?" Max stepped in front of her and asked, trying to be intimidating. Kai stared at him, his gaze not wavering. "I am Kai Malarkey," he said, moving closer and smiling, dangerously slow. Max gulped, clearly scared. "You're not the owner of the restaurant, so fuck the hell off." Kai raised his hand. I was scared because I thought he was going to hit him, and brought out his phone, still staring at Max, and dialed a number. The phone rang, and then a male voice spoke faintly from the other side of the phone. "Hello, Alpha Kai?" The man said, probably his beta. Kai's gaze, not still leaving Max, said, "I want to buy this restaurant right now," he said, and I gasped. Why would he want to buy this restaurant? What is he doing? I was anxious as we waited for the manager. As in cue, he walked in. "Mr. Malarkey, I got the call," he said, still walking towards us, clearly oblivious to the scene, his face all smiles. Kai smirked and he turned his face towards the manager and said, "Oh yes, so I'd like a little favor." The manager visibly clapped, still oblivious to the scene. He smiled. "Of course, what is it?" Kai's nose flared as he released a slow breath, then he smiled. "I would like you to throw these people out." He looked at them, his face laced with disgust. The manager, now clear to the scene, nodded and moved towards them. As he was about to call the security, Layla stepped out. "You can't dare. Do you know who I am? I am the daughter of Luna Olive of Graywood Pack," she shouted. The manager flinched, clearly scared of the name. He turned and looked at Kai. Kai laughed, clearly amused at Layla's pathetic act. "You aren't their actual daughter, Bella is. You were only adopted." The shock on Max's face was satisfying. They always saw me as a nobody, unworthy of certain privileges. "I think it'd be best if you left with the ounce of dignity you have left, or I would ask that you be dragged out of my property." Kai's voice, now cold, boomed through the space as he tucked his hands in his pockets. With a huff, Layla stormed off, stomping her feet against the ground as she did with her fiancé trailing behind her. The manager turned to us and smiled. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Malarkey. That will never happen again." "Obviously not," Kai said, just as he walked towards my shaky body and pulled me to his arms. "You okay?" he asked. His minty breath fanned my face as I exhaled. "Yes," I said, and rested my head on his chest. I was exhausted. I still couldn't believe what had happened. Gosh! How much lower will Layla stoop? Just then, I looked over Kai's chest and looked out the window. I saw Max and Layla. "Why did you tell us to go?" Max asked Layla, his voice evident that he wasn't happy. He looked at her with a questioning gaze. "Shh! They can hear us. And besides, what was the point of staying? There was already enough drama going on." She told him, her face perplexed as she stood at the sidewalk. "Layla, is there something you aren't telling me?" Max's voice was questioning but calm. "Max, please not here. The baby is kicking and I don't feel good." She rubbed her, not so obvious, bump and stared at him. Max immediately walked towards her and pulled her to a bench, out of sight. As I sat down next to Kai, I could feel the tension still radiating from his body. His eyes scanned the restaurant, his jaw clenched in anger. I placed a gentle hand on his arm, trying to calm him down. "It's okay, Kai. They are gone now," I whispered. Kai's gaze snapped back at mine, his eyes narrowing slightly. For a moment I thought he was angry at me for the commission, but then his gaze softened. His hands covered mine, his touch sending a shiver down my spine. "I'm sorry about that," he said, his voice low and husky. "Shh, I should be the one apologizing. I shouldn't have put you in the middle of all that," I said, my voice low from nervousness. "You didn't. You were badass, by the way." He smiled and I laughed. Kai's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, his touch sending a spark of electricity through my body. I knew that I was in trouble, getting involved with an alpha. But, as I looked into his eyes, I knew that I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to him. "So, what would you like to have?" he said, drawing his hands from mine, and I immediately missed his touch. I lowered my gaze to hide my burning cheeks. I'd love to have seafood boils and tibs." He flickered his gaze towards the waiter and told him our order. "I like it when you blush for me. It makes me feel whole," he said, his eyes tingling with excitement. I blushed hard and bit my lips from smiling. I wasn't blushing. I was just hot. "What makes you think I'll blush for you?" I teased him, and he just smiled. He leaned closer towards me from across the table, his scent lingering in my nostrils as I breathed in and leaned, dropping my hands on the table. He held my chin and looked into my eyes. My breathing hitched as I stared back. His gaze dropped to my lips, and I licked my lips. He growled, deep and throaty, and said, "You make me so fucking turned on." He smiled and pulled back. The smell of seafood filled my senses, and I averted my gaze from him to the food as the waiter walked towards our table. "Here is your meal, sir. Have a nice meal." He bowed, then dropped the food and left. Excitement bobbled over me, and I picked my cutlery and began to eat. I moaned, and I immediately looked up, my face burning from embarrassment as Kai watched me. "Bella." Not long after we finished eating, the waiter returned, his polished smile intact as he gestured toward the far side of the restaurant. "Mr. Kai, Miss Bella, your next activity is ready, if you'd follow me." I glanced at Kai, raising an eyebrow in question. "Next activity?" Kai stood, extending a hand toward me. "You'll see. Come on." His tone held a teasing edge, but I hesitated, eyeing him suspiciously before finally taking his hand. His grip was warm and steady, and though I hated to admit it, there was something weirdly reassuring about it. We followed the waiter down a short hallway and into a cozy room. It was smaller than the dining area, with soft lighting and an intimate vibe. My gaze landed on the setup, easels, canvases, and an array of paints and brushes neatly arranged on a long table. I blinked in surprise. "Painting?" I asked, turning to Kai with a mix of curiosity and amusement. He shrugged, his signature smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "Thought we'd try something creative. You game?" I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "I'm no Picasso, but sure, why not?" "Good," he said, motioning to one of the seats. "I've got high hopes for your artistic talents," he teased. We sat across from each other, each at an easel, as the waiter explained the setup. The goal was to draw each other, a concept that sounded simple in theory, but already had me feeling self-conscious. As we began, I couldn't resist sneaking a peek at Kai. He was holding the paintbrush in a way that suggested he hadn't touched one since grade school. His brow furrowed in concentration, and he tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my stomach do an odd little flip. "You okay over there?" I teased, dipping my brush into the paint and dragging it across the canvas. He glanced up, his expression mock serious. "I'll have you know I'm an artist in my own right," I snorted. "Oh, really? Do stick figures count?" He smirked, tapping the end of his brush against the edge of his easel. "You're underestimating me, Bella. This is going to be a masterpiece." "Uh-huh," I said, biting back a grin. "I'll believe it when I see it." "Don't worry," he said, his voice laced with confidence. "You'll be impressed." "You're not supposed to look until we're done," I reminded him, narrowing my eyes. "Rules are meant to be broken," he quipped, leaning slightly to try and catch a glimpse of my canvas. "Hey!" I laughed, using my hand to block his view. "Focus on your own painting, Mr. Artist." He chuckled, holding his hands up in mock surrender before turning his attention back to his easel. the room filled with the soft sounds of brushes against canvas and the occasional clink of paint jars. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected, but the silence didn't last long. "So," Kai said, breaking the quiet, "what's your art experience? I'm assuming you've never done this before, considering how nervous you looked when we started." I rolled my eyes, dipping my brush into a bright color. "I'll have you know I took an art class in junior high." "Oh?" His tone was teasing. "And how did that go?" "Well, I didn't fail, if that's what you're implying," I shot back, trying to sound offended but failing miserably. He laughed, the sound deep and genuine. "Fair enough, but I'm still betting mine turns out better." "That's quite a lot coming from someone who doesn't even know how to hold a paintbrush properly," I said, gesturing to the awkward grip he had on his brush. Kai glanced at his hand and then back at me, unbothered. "It's all part of the process. You wouldn't understand." I rolled my eyes again, but couldn't help the smile tugging at my lips. As we continued painting, the conversation shifted, becoming a little more personal. "What about you?" I asked. "Ever try your hand at art?" He shrugged, his brush moving in slow, deliberate strokes. "Not really. I've always been more practical. This is way out of my comfort zone." I raised an eyebrow. "Practical? You mean bossing people around and signing papers?" His lips twitched in amusement. "Something like that." "Well," I said, turning back to my canvas, "I think it might be good for you. Stepping out of your comfort zone, is that so?" "Yep." For a few moments after that, there was even more silence in the room. Well, that is until Kai broke it again. "Bella," he started, his tone quieter than usual. I glanced up but didn't stop painting. "Yeah?" "I've been meaning to say something," he continued, "about how we started this whole situation." I set my brush down for a moment, meeting his gaze across the table. "What about it?" He looked away, his jaw tightening slightly. "I wasn't exactly kind to you in the beginning. I didn't make things easy, and I apologize for that." His honesty caught me off guard. Kai wasn't the type to admit fault easily, at least from what I'd seen. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "You weren't the only one. I wasn't exactly rolling out the welcome mat to you either." He chuckled softly. "No, you weren't." His expression softened and he looked at me again. "But I want to do better, for both our sakes. We're basically together now, and I think we should at least try to make it work." I nodded slowly. "I agree. We don't have to be best friends, but some mutual respect wouldn't hurt." "Exactly," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. I picked up my brush again, trying to focus on the painting. When we finished, the waiter returned to take our canvases and place them side by side. Kai and I stood, moving around the easels to look at each other's work. I burst out laughing the moment I saw his painting. "What?" he demanded, though he was already grinning. "It's unique," I said, trying to be diplomatic as I pointed at the misshapen blob he'd drawn for my hair. He crossed his arms, pretending to look offended. "At least I got your eyes right. Yours looks like a stick figure." "It does not," I said, laughing even harder. We spent a few minutes playfully arguing over whose painting was worse before the waiter returned to announce the next part of the evening. "This way, please," he said, leading us up a spiral staircase to the top floor of the restaurant. When we stepped into the room, I couldn't help but gasp. The ceiling was made entirely of glass, offering an unobstructed view of the night sky. A telescope stood in one corner, and a plush couch was nestled near a small table with drinks and snacks. "Wow," I breathed, turning to Kai. "This is amazing." He smiled, clearly pleased with my reaction. "Oh, hoped you'd like it." We settled on the couch, the soft cushions making it feel more like a cozy living room than a fancy restaurant. I leaned back, staring up at the stars. I can't remember the last time I did this. "What, stargaze?" "Yeah," I said, my voice soft. "It's easy to forget how beautiful the world can be when you're caught up in everything else." Kai didn't say anything, but I felt his gaze on me. When I turned to look at him, his expression was unreadable, his eyes darker than usual. Our hands brushed as we reached for the telescope at the same time. The touch sent a jolt through me, and I pulled back slightly, only for him to catch my hand. "Bella," he said, his voice low and serious, pulling my attention entirely to him. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest as if trying to make itself known. "Yeah? Are you sure you're ready for this?" His gaze was steady, unyielding, as though he could see straight through me. We both knew what was about to happen next. I hesitated, my thoughts tumbling over each other. It wasn't that I didn't know the answer. I did. But how do you say something like that without sounding desperate and needy? Which, let's face it, you probably are. Finally, I nodded, my voice quiet but certain. Yeah, I am. His brows raised slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before softening. Honestly, I added, feeling the need to fill the silence, I kind of have been for a while. Kai's lips quirked into the faintest of smiles, and in that moment I decided to stop overthinking. Without giving myself the chance to second guess, I leaned in and kissed him. For a second, Kai froze, caught off guard, but then he responded, and it was as if a dam broke. His hand slid up to cradle my face, his thumb brushing gently against my cheek as he deepened the kiss. The sensation was overwhelming. I reached up, my fingers tangling in the fabric of his shirt, holding on to him as if letting go wasn't an option. His other hand found my waist, steady and firm, anchoring me in place. When we finally pulled apart, I realized I was breathless. My cheeks were flushed, and I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes. Kai didn't say anything at first, his thumb still idly brushing along my jaw as if he was reluctant to let the moment end. I cleared my throat, shifting back slightly, though the distance felt wrong. "We should probably go," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Kai's lips curved into a soft smile, the kind that made my chest tighten. "Yeah," he said, his voice just as low. "Let's get out of here." Bella. As I raised a forkful of food to my mouth, I caught Xavier watching me with a weird look. I let out a chortle. "What?" He shrugged casually and continued eating. Something was definitely on his mind. "Tell me," I urged, but he didn't budge. Frustrated, I reached forward, pulling the fork out of his grip. "Hey!" he retorted. Just then, a curly-headed Latina walked past our table, staring at me with disdain. Did I know her? In my distraction, Xavier took his fork back, a smile threatening to split his face in half. "Who's that?" I asked, nudging my head in the direction of the curly-haired woman. Xavier turned in her direction, and his smile instantly disappeared. "Oh," his voice dropped, slightly above a whisper. "Nobody important," he replied, turning away from her. "Trouble in paradise?" I asked, wiggling my brows playfully. No." He dragged the no, making it sound like a question. "Why would you even think that?" "Because she's been ogling you, and also staring at me like she'd pounce on me any second and rip me into pieces." I answered with a teasing tone as I took a sip of water. "Well, she's nobody important, and I'm sure you'd be the one to rip her into pieces if she dared to pounce on you," he said, and the last part made my chest swell in pride, a smile touching my lips. "So, about why you were staring at me weirdly earlier." "I was just wondering where you went last night," he said, his brows arched. "You didn't tell me where you were going, and you didn't pick my calls when I called." "Oh, shoot." I trailed off, fondling with my fingers underneath the table. He leaned in, resting his interlocked fingers on the table, his brow still arched as he waited for my answer. "I was with Kai," I said, and he furrowed his brows. I knew what thought must have settled in his mind, so I quickly added, "We went on a date," even though he wasn't exactly wrong to think that something happened between Kai and me. I bit on the insides of my cheeks, hoping he would either buy it or not push it further. But who was I kidding? "That doesn't explain why you weren't home last night." He wasn't fooled. I spent the night at his place. I gulped down the remaining content of my glass. Xavier still had his gaze pinned on me in that way that made me feel awkward. I sighed. "Stop looking at me like I'm done bacteria under a microscope. I'm just looking out for you," he replied, and I nodded in understanding. "I'm just really bugged by the situation at home." My voice dropped below an octave as I let the memories of how I had left my newly found home flood my mind. I winced, closing my eyes. "Hey, Bells," he cooed, taking both of my hands in his, caressing the back of my palms softly with his thumbs. "You are the Omega of Ashwood Pack. Do you realize how important you are?" He bobbed his head to the side, staring at me with a soft smile. I wasn't convinced, and as though he could sense it, he continued. "I know this wasn't exactly what you expected when you came back home to us after so many years, and I'm sorry things turned out the way they did. But everything is going to be all right, okay?" He finished, and I nodded. "Okay. Good. Now smile?" I couldn't resist the huge smile that spread across my lips. Xavier had a way of making me feel better, even on the worst days, and I was immensely grateful. It's 15 minutes to the scheduled time for the surgery. Let's go. He stood up and I followed. We entered the theater, washed our hands, and put on surgical greens, nose masks, and hairnets. When we were done, we started with the operation. Doing this operation with Xavier definitely boosted my confidence. I liked that he let me take charge at some points, and it wasn't like I was just another student in the operating room. I liked that he trusted me. Although this particular surgery was a bit complicated, it was successful, and I couldn't be more excited. I could only imagine when I would finally perform Cora's surgery. With Xavier, of course. "You did really well today," he praised as we walked down the corridors. A proud smile spread across my lips as I muttered a shy, "Thank you. Don't you have any shame?" A voice tore through the silence as we stepped into the lounge. I whipped my head in the direction of the voice to see a woman staring at us with her face scrunched up in disgust. Was she talking to me? Us? I looked behind me to be sure that there was nobody there. There wasn't. She was talking to us. "Excuse me?" Xavier bobbed his head to the side, confused as he stared at the woman. This was the doctor's lounge, so she was most definitely a doctor. But what was the matter all of a sudden? Cozying up to each other even in the operating room and nearly putting a patient's life in danger? How much more careless can one be? She was clearly angry, her brows drawn together, her voice loud and strained, but I still didn't understand what she meant by cozying up to each other. "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. We are." She cut me off. "Excuses. That's all they always have to offer in the end. A patient could have died because of your negligence. Aren't you bothered about that? Couldn't you wait until after the surgery was over before—" She paused, shaking her head. "Mathilda, calm down," Xavier spoke. "This whole thing is a misunderstanding." I looked around the room to see the other doctors staring, watching the scene unfold with judgment in their eyes. Judgment against us. But this was all a fucking misunderstanding. "Tucker!" "Bella!" Another voice called, and we turned towards the entrance to see a nurse standing there, fondling with her fingers, her eyes pinned on the floors like they were the most interesting thing in the room. "Mr. Moore demands to see you in his office." She relayed, and a fit of murmurs erupted in the lounge. Mr. Moore was the hospital director, so I could understand the reaction from the doctors in the lounge. Xavier, visibly annoyed, stormed out of the lounge, and I followed behind him. "What is going on?" he asked, walking into Mr. Moore's office, his voice surprisingly calm, but the anger in his voice was still very much prominent. "I should be asking you that," Mr. Moore replied, his hands clasped together on the table as he leaned forward. "You put a patient's life at risk, doing inappropriate things in the operating room. I could have your license revoked. How pathetic is it that petty rumors fly around and you, the director," Xavier said the last part in a mocking tone, "didn't bother to do proper research and is threatening to revoke our licenses. You're not denying it?" Mr. Moore quipped a brow and Xavier let out a breathy laugh. "I expected more from someone with such a high position." He scoffed. "Bella is my sister, goddammit. I have no idea what the fuck these rumors are about." He raised his voice, throwing his hands in exaggerated gestures. I had never seen Xavier so riled up, not even when he caught Kai and me in a compromising situation. "I will not work at a place where I am treated with no regard, no respect. After inviting me over to help at your hospital, this is how you show your gratitude?" He scoffed again. "Dr. Xavier," Mr. Moore tried to salvage the storm, but Xavier had had enough, cutting him off by raising his hand. "Let's go, Bella," he said, and just as we turned to walk out, Kai walked in. "What's going on here?" he asked, his gaze darting among us three. Mr. Moore went on, explaining to Kai what exactly happened, and "oh" was all Kai had to say about the whole thing. Upset, I turned to Mr. Moore. "I think it would be appropriate if you figured out who started the rumors. We deserve to know." He nodded, and in a few minutes the culprit stood before us. It was the same curly-haired Latina I saw ogling Xavier at dinner. It clicked. She probably thought I was into Xavier, so she staged an entire rumor to embarrass us and probably have us kicked out of the hospital. "Why did you do what you did?" I asked, squinting as I stared at her. She shrugged casually. I just said what I thought I saw. I didn't think it would become the hot gist of the hospital in a matter of minutes. I don't believe you, I retorted. I don't care. Her nonchalance irked me, and I fought the urge to claw at her face. I turned to the director. I think you should let her go, I said to him, and he furrowed his brows in confusion. Let her go? He echoed after me. She's clearly more interested in gossip than she is in her actual job. I think she should be relieved of her duties. I said, Hey! Kai cut in, moving towards me. I think that's too much. Moreover, she said she made a mistake. I was confused, hurt. Did you miss the part where she humiliated Xavier and me? I demanded, my brows drawn together in anger. Well, I did, and Elaine would issue a public apology for the runouts she started. He replied. I scoffed. An apology? That's it? I asked, waiting for him to say anything else, but he didn't. I felt a song in my chest, my eyes stinging. Fuck you, Kai. I stormed out of the office. I was about to exit the lobby when a voice called me back. Dr. Bella. I turned around, and to my gray displeasure, it was the curly-headed Latina, Elaine. Just in case you missed the memo, stay the fuck away from Kai and Xavier, she said, her voice filled with malice.